It was a normal day at one of the busiest airports in the country. People were rushing through security lines, luggage wheels rolling loudly on the marble floor, and announcements echoed overhead. No one imagined that something unusual was about to happen. Everyone was just trying to catch flights, meet family, or return home. Nothing seemed different until a group of uniformed officers started gathering near gate 27. Their eyes were fixed on the entrance. As if they were preparing for something serious, a tall man in a formal suit stepped through the gate, pulling along a simple suitcase. He didn't walk like someone who liked attention. His movement was calm, quiet, almost humble, but the people who recognized him stared in shock. He was not an ordinary traveler. He was the FBI director, one of the most powerful law enforcement officers in the country. Many people saw him previously on TV during public conferences, giving strict warnings against corruption and crime. Now, he stood here, looking tired from travel, just wanting to go home after a long official trip overseas, before he could take more than a few steps. The group of airport officers moved toward him. One of them, clearly the leader, stepped ahead and spoke firmly, trying to sound confident even though his voice slightly shook. "Sir, we need you to come with us." The director paused, his calm eyes scanning their faces. The officer held a document in his hand, stamped with federal markings. People around started whispering. Phones came up as some passengers began to record. No one understood why such a high-ranking person was being stopped. Some looked shocked, others curious, and a few simply watched, like they were seeing a movie scene. The director looked at the officers. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently, as if he already knew the answer. The lead officer swallowed hard. "We received orders to detain you immediately." The airport grew more silent, even though hundreds were standing there. Behind the group of officers, a few guards looked confused, uncomfortable, almost scared. None of them wanted to be the ones handcuffing a man who led the most powerful investigative agency in the country. Yet orders were orders. They had been told they must follow them without question. The director didn't argue. He slowly put down his suitcase and raised his hands slightly, making it clear he wouldn't resist. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said calmly, his voice steady, without anger. It wasn't a threat. It sounded more like a warning. The officers didn't know what to say. They had no answer. They simply had a paper that told them to act. A few of them exchanged nervous glances. Something felt wrong. The director did not look shocked or angry. He looked disappointed, like a teacher watching students make a wrong decision. One officer stepped forward to take his arm. His hands trembled. The director noticed and quietly told him, "It's all right." Those two simple words made the officer feel even worse. The crowd was now whispering loudly. Some thought he was being arrested for a secret crime. Others believed it was a mistake. A woman near the seating area muttered, "Why would the FBI arrest their own boss?" A young man recording the scene whispered, "This is going viral." The officers escorted the director through the hallway. Every step they took felt heavier. The director walked straight, unafraid, almost like he knew this moment was coming. The lead officer kept checking the arrest document, rereading it, as if hoping it said something else. His instincts kept telling him this wasn't right. But what choice did he have? They took him to a small holding room near the security office. It was a plain room with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a cloudy window that didn't let much light in. The director sat down, still calm. He leaned back slightly, as if he was just waiting for a meeting to start. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand anything. He simply said, "Call the person who issued the order." The officers looked at each other helplessly. The order had come through a secure digital system. There was no phone number, no signature they recognized, only a federal stamp and a warning not to question it. The lead officer tried to look confident, but his voice cracked a little as he replied, "We can't, sir." The director nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "You're following instructions, but you will regret not questioning them. No threats. Just certainty." The officers stood there, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Outside the room, the airport continued its busy life. Children were laughing, people calling loved ones, coffee shops grinding beans, flights being announced. No one outside that small room realized that something dangerous was starting something bigger than mistaken identity or a false arrest. The director folded his hands on the table. He looked at the officers again, and with a soft tone, he said something that made their hearts pound faster. "You have no idea who is really behind this." Those words hung in the air like a storm cloud. The officers shifted nervously. But the director said nothing else. He didn't try to explain. He didn't defend himself. He just waited, letting silence speak for him. The air in the room felt heavier, like the truth was too big to fit inside. Even the guards, who moments ago followed orders without question, now wondered if they had just helped someone powerful commit a massive mistake. One of them whispered to another, "What if we arrested the wrong man?" The director heard it, but he didn't react. He simply stared at the door, as if expecting more trouble to arrive. Yet his face showed no fear, only patience, as the officers stepped outside to make frightened phone calls and check the order again. The director remained seated. He knew something they didn't. Something dark, something hidden, something far more dangerous than an airport arrest. And while they struggled with confusion and guilt, he sat silently, waiting for the truth they would soon discover on their own. Whatever was happening, the airport arrest was only the beginning. And the people who carried it out were about to understand just how deep their mistake truly was. The officers left the holding room with uneasy faces, and the door shut quietly behind them. The hallway outside was filled with the usual airport noise, yet their hearts felt heavier than any sound around them. What they had done did not feel right anymore. At first, everyone had been focused on simply following orders. But now doubt began to grow like a small flame, slowly turning into a dangerous fire. The lead officer walked toward the main desk, holding the arrest document tightly. He kept staring at the federal seal, trying to convince himself it was real. But something about it looked too perfect, almost like a printed image instead of an official stamp. The others noticed his confusion and started whispering. One younger officer finally spoke. "Sir, are we sure this order came from the central agency?" The lead officer didn't answer. He simply looked at the computer screen in front of him. He typed in the director's name for the 5th time that morning. The screen showed the same result: no charges, no investigation, no pending action. Cleared at all national levels. The system showed a clean record, the kind of clean that looked almost too clean. It was strange. Someone with such a high position always had confidential cases linked to them. At least something. But the system showed nothing. A chilling thought crossed the lead officer's mind. Someone erased his records. Or someone blocked it from us. Another officer anxiously leaned in. "Try a deeper search," he said. "Use restricted access." The lead officer hesitated. Using restricted access without permission could cost him his job. But then he remembered the director's calm face and the words that seemed to linger in his ears. "You will regret not questioning them." He took a quiet breath and typed a secure code. The system flashed a warning, but he continued. A new page opened. This time, there were files, lots of them, but they were locked. Every single one. The system requested a password only government headquarters would have. Beneath each file name were red labels: top secret, classified, do not open. It was almost as if someone deliberately hid a mountain of information behind a digital wall. The young officer behind him whispered in fear. Why would someone need to hide something about their own director? Nobody replied. Meanwhile, inside the holding room, the director sat alone, still calm. He didn't move around. He didn't show impatience. His hands were folded, and he seemed more worried about the officers than his own arrest. He wasn't trying to escape, call a lawyer, or demand answers. It was as if he had seen this coming for a long time. Back at the desk, one of the officers nervously tried to call the number listed in the arrest order. But every time he dialed, the call didn't go through. Not even once. It was strange. Official lines never failed. Someone cleared their voice behind him. Double quotes, "Sir, what if this order did not come from the government?" The idea struck everyone like a sudden shock. Fake orders? For the highest law enforcement official in the country, The thought alone sent chills down their spines. They looked over their shoulders, realizing that if the arrest was fake, then this wasn't just a mistake, it was a trap, and they were being used as tools in something much bigger. The lead officer's voice shook slightly now. We need to contact headquarters directly. Before he could dial, his phone buzzed with a message. Everyone glanced at the screen. The message was short. One sentence, and it made the officer's face turn pale. Do not question the arrest. Do not contact headquarters. Continue holding him. No signature. No department. Just a message. Anonymous, but clearly watching them. One officer stepped back, whispering, "How could someone know we were about to call?" The lead officer slowly put his phone down, his mind racing. Someone was monitoring them in real time. This wasn't just strange anymore. It was dangerous. After a long moment of silence, he said, "We need to check the communication source." Another officer pulled up the digital source log. The screen loaded slowly, and then something unexpected appeared. The order was traced from a network outside the government system, not from a secure federal line, not from a restricted agency code. It came from somewhere unregistered, unknown, masked, a fake order, a heavy silence filled the room. Suddenly, the airport noise outside felt distant. They were no longer just officers in a public building. They were witnesses to something dark, something powerful enough to fake a federal arrest. The lead officer took a deep breath. We need to go back and speak to him.
Yes.
The officers returned to the holding room, their faces tense, but filled with a new intent. When they walked inside, the director lifted his head slowly. He looked at their expressions and seemed to know exactly what they had discovered. None of them needed to explain. The director gave a small nod, as if to say, "It's time you understood." One of the officers finally spoke, his voice soft and shaken. "Sir, someone wanted you arrested. Someone powerful. This order is not real." The director leaned forward slightly. "I know," he said. "I know exactly who wants me silenced." The officers exchanged worried looks. If he knew, why hadn't he stopped it? Why hadn't he resisted? The director studied their faces and then spoke with calm firmness. "I could have stopped you before you even touched me. But if I fought you, if I ran away, what would it look like to the public? I needed them to expose themselves first. Now we have proof." The officers felt a chill run down their arms. He was not a helpless prisoner. He was letting the trap happen. "Just to find out who built it," the youngest officer whispered. "So this isn't about you? It's about something bigger, isn't it?" The director nodded. "Bigger than all of us." Her fear turned into a strange mix of respect and dread. Whatever was happening was far from over. They had stepped into something they didn't understand yet. A storm was coming, and they were standing right in the middle of it. The director waited a moment, then said quietly, "Now you must decide whether you want to keep following orders or start seeking the truth." And that choice would change everything. The room felt smaller now, as if the air itself had thickened after the director spoke. The officers stood silently, processing his words. None of them had imagined their day would begin with routine duties and end with a decision that could cost them their careers. The director waited patiently, giving them time to accept what they had stepped into. The lead officer finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost careful. "Sir, if someone powerful is trying to silence you, why not go public? Why not expose them already?" The director sighed quietly. "To expose corruption, you need evidence, not suspicion. Evidence that cannot be denied, not even by those who control the system." One officer frowned. "But someone powerful can destroy evidence. Can't they delete everything before you get it?" The director looked straight at him. "They already tried." Those 3 words hit the room like a cold wind. The officers leaned in slightly, unsure if they wanted to hear more, yet unable to step back now. The director slowly placed his hands flat on the table. "A week before I traveled overseas, I found irregular activities inside our national database. Unauthorized checks, hidden files being opened at odd hours, remote access requests from anonymous servers. I traced them back to someone who should not have had that clearance," the youngest officer asked. The director shook his head gently. Not yet. But I found enough to know that someone high above wants to erase sensitive information. And anyone who discovers it. Tense quiet followed. The officers realized this wasn't about politics or personal rivalry. This was about control over information, over truth. The director continued with a calmer tone. They used your airport to make it look convincing. If local security arrests me, the public thinks it must be real. It becomes easier for them to finish what they planned. The lead officer slowly pulled out the fake arrest document. They planned to take you from here. Transfer you somewhere else? The director nodded. Yes, to a private facility, not a government facility. They would have claimed it was for national security, and no one would have questioned it. The officers felt their stomachs twist. They had almost become part of a plan to make a respected official vanish. One officer whispered, "This could ruin us. If they find out we're questioning the arrest." The director leaned back. "That is why you must choose carefully. If you continue to follow orders blindly, you become their shield. If you start thinking, you become a threat." Exchanged nervous glances. The choice felt impossible. Help the truth, or keep their jobs. Before anyone replied, a sudden knock struck the door. Sharp, fast, unexpected. The officer stiffened. A voice from the other side called politely, "Airport security check. We need to confirm the detainee's status." The lead officer's eyes widened. They hadn't requested anyone. He motioned to the others to stay still. The director nodded knowingly, as if he had expected this. The officer opened the door only halfway and stepped out. Two unfamiliar airport officers stood there. Their uniforms were correct, but their badges looked slightly too new. One of them asked with unusual confidence, "We need to transfer the detainee to a secure federal location." The lead officer examined their badges closely. Something felt wrong. These weren't regular airport officers. Their shoes were polished like they had never walked a shift. Their belts had no standard wear marks. Their eyes weren't nervous or curious. They were cold, focused, trained. "Who gave the order?" The lead officer asked calmly. "Central Authority," one of them replied too quickly. "Which division?" The officer pressed. The stranger smiled thinly. "It's classified. We don't disclose that to local personnel." That sentence confirmed everything. Real government officers never spoke like that. They always provided division details. The lead officer felt his pulse jump. These men weren't there to enforce the law. They were there to finish the plan. Before responding, he said, "Let me verify this transfer." "Hold on." He closed the door and returned inside. His voice came out in a whisper. "They're here to take you. No paperwork. No verification." The director calmly nodded. "They cannot let me speak. Not here." One officer looked panicked. "What do we do? Hide you? Sneak you out?" The director shook his head. "No. If I run, I look guilty. They are counting on that. But you can delay them. You can demand proper authorization. Ask for signatures, clearance codes, federal ID scans. They won't have them." The lead officer understood. "We stall." "Yes," the director replied. "Long enough for me to make a call." One of the officers frowned. "But you asked to call earlier." "We said no." The director smiled faintly. "Now you understand why I needed it." The officers felt a strange mix of embarrassment and respect. The director wasn't angry at them. He knew they were being used. He also knew they could help fix the mistake. The youngest officer took out his phone. "I'll lock the door from outside and stand guard. If they try to force entry," the director stopped him gently with a hand motion. "No physical fights. No confrontation. Just procedure. It protects you, and it protects me." The officer nodded. The director then said softly, "Who has the deepest access to the system here?" The lead officer stepped forward. "I can access restricted lines. Not to headquarters, but I can reach verified internal contacts." "Good," the director replied. "You're not calling anyone. You're sending a digital flag. Hidden. Only trusted officials will see it." The officer's heart pounded. A silent alert. "Yes," the director said. "And once it's seen, the real federal teams will come. not imposters. The officer took a long breath. He realized the director had not been powerless for even a moment. He had been waiting for the right move. Do we still have a choice? The officer asked him. The director looked at all of them. Yes, he said calmly. The choice is simple. Do you stand with the truth or with fear? They all understood, and for the first time since the morning began, none of them felt afraid. Something bigger than fear was starting to grow inside the small room. Responsibility. The storm outside was getting closer, and they were now choosing which side they would stand on. When it finally arrived, the fake officers outside the holding room waited impatiently. They stood with straight posture, pretending to be relaxed, but their eyes kept scanning every direction. They were not here to follow the law. They were here to make sure the director never walked out of the airport again. Inside the room, the lead officer rushed to the computer station near the corner. It wasn't a normal one. It was linked to the security network. He typed quietly, trying not to draw attention. His fingers shook as he entered the restricted login. The director stood behind him, watching closely but not interfering. The younger officers waited near the door, trying to listen through the tiny crack. The lead officer clicked into the system and reached a hidden menu. He took a slow breath and whispered, "I'm about to send the silent alert." The director nodded. Only high-clearance officials can read it. Once they do, they'll verify my arrest and come here. They'll also identify who falsified the documents. The officer pressed the key. A soft tone beeped. The alert was sent. "Now we wait," the director said softly. Outside. One of the fake officers knocked again, louder this time. "Transfer needs to begin now," the voice demanded. The youngest airport officer stepped out into the hallway and forced a polite smile. "We can't transfer without verified documents. Please provide your internal code and federal signature." The fake officer narrowed his eyes. "We told you. It's classified." "And we told you," the young officer replied nervously. "We can't move a federal detainee without proof." The fake officer leaned forward with a cold smirk. "You think this is up for debate? Move aside." He tried to push forward, but the young officer stayed firm. It was the first time in his life he stopped someone with nothing but procedure. "Without paperwork," he repeated, "we cannot proceed." His heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst, but he stood still like a wall. The fake officers backed off a little, but not because he scared them. They didn't want attention. Too much noise would bring real officials. Back inside the room, the tension grew thicker. One of the airport officers asked, "How long until the alert reaches someone?" The director looked at the door calmly. "If they haven't blocked the federal network." "Soon," the lead officer gulped. "And if they have blocked it?" The director answered without fear, "Then they're more desperate than I thought." Minutes passed, like hours. Every second felt heavy, filled with waiting, uncertainty, and danger. The officers tried not to show fear, but their breathing gave them away. Only the director remained still, like he had learned to live with danger long ago. Suddenly, the security computer chimed. A blue notification appeared. The lead officer read it carefully. Alert received. Verification in progress. He turned to the director with relief in his eyes. They got it. The director gave a slight nod, but his face didn't relax yet. Verification is only the first step. They'll cross-check the arrest order now. When they discover it's fake, they'll send real agents. One of the officers whispered, "And the people outside will know they failed." Before anyone could respond, another knock hit the door, this time harder, sharper. Like someone losing patience, the fake officer shouted angrily, "You're out of time. Bring him out now, or we come in." The officers looked at one another. The youngest one whispered, "They're getting desperate." The lead officer tightened his jaw. "We're following federal protocol. If you break the door, you're committing a crime." A long silence followed. Then, surprisingly, the fake officer laughed. A slow, mocking laugh. "Who do you think will arrest us?" The airport officers froze. He was right, they didn't know who these men worked for, or how powerful they were. The lead officer swallowed hard. His throat felt dry like sand. We will report your names, your faces. The fake officer cut him off. You won't get that chance. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only they could hear. This is bigger than paperwork. Bigger than that man in there. If you continue this, you'll lose your jobs. Or worse, will take his place. The young officer felt a chill. His hands trembled. But something changed inside him. Fear was still there, but so was something stronger: loyalty. Not to his job or to the director, but to the truth. He replied shakily, "Threats don't change protocol." The fake officer stared at him with cold eyes. The young officer stepped back inside and locked the door quickly. Inside, the breaths of all the officers were heavy. The director looked at them with a firm, calm expression. "You've done your part. The rest depends on timing." The minutes crawled. The sound of airport crowds outside felt distant, like another world. Then, just as tension reached its peak, the security system made one more tone. A message appeared on the screen. "Order is fraudulent. Real agents dispatched. ETA, 2 minutes." The officers almost sighed out loud, but the director held up a finger, motioning them to be silent. "That message," he whispered, "didn't just come to you. The ones outside received it too." Everyone froze. They realized what that meant. The imposters wouldn't wait for the real agents to arrive. They would act now, as if on cue. As the fake officers' footsteps shifted. They weren't knocking anymore. They were preparing to force their way in. The director stood up slowly for the first time since the arrest. His voice remained steady, but this time it carried urgency. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't let them near this computer. If they destroy the alert record, the truth disappears." The officers didn't know what would happen next, but they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They weren't just protecting a man anymore. They were protecting evidence. And evidence was more powerful than any threat in the world. The footsteps outside grew louder, closer. The imposters knew they were losing control. Their voices shouted, demanding the door be opened. But the airport officers, inspired by the director's calm courage, held their ground. They had learned something important. Following fear would destroy the truth. Protecting it might save lives. Inside the room, the director leaned slightly over the computer. "Stay alert. Don't panic. Remember, procedure is your shield." The lead officer nodded. His hands moved fast, checking the system and keeping a close eye on the door. He could hear the intruders trying to force entry, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't just protecting the director, he was protecting justice. The younger officer whispered, "They're breaking in." The director raised a hand to stop him. "Not yet. They want a reaction. Don't give it. Remain calm." The door rattled under the weight of their attacks. The air in the room felt thick with tension, like electricity before a storm. Then, a soft but firm voice came through the radio of the lead officer. It was the real federal agents. "Stand down. Hold position. Backup is on the way." The imposters froze. They exchanged glances, realizing they had underestimated the silent alert and the speed of the real network. Panic began to show on their faces. They were used to people obeying without question. These officers had chosen courage. The real agents arrived within minutes. They stormed in with authority, quickly identifying the imposters and detaining them. The imposters protested, claiming authority and power, but the genuine agents ignored the lies. The airport officers watched as the men who had threatened them were finally removed from the building. The director didn't speak immediately. He simply observed, calm and composed, while the situation unfolded. Once it was secure, he turned to the officers. "You did well," he said. "Your courage and calm prevented a disaster. You could have followed fear and let them succeed. Instead, you chose truth." The officers felt relief wash over them, but also awe. They had been part of something extraordinary. They had faced threats bigger than anything in their careers, yet they had stood firm. And because of them, powerful conspiracy had been stopped before it could silence justice. The lead officer finally asked, "Sir, what happens now?" The director smiled faintly. "Now we ensure the truth reaches the public. The men behind this attempt will face justice, and those who are silent or complicit will be exposed. But most importantly, we remember that ordinary people like you can, make extraordinary choices when they decide to act with courage. The officers nodded. They realized the significance of their actions. They had started the day just following orders, but by the end, they had made a choice that mattered. They had saved the director and helped protect the truth. Later, when everything was officially reported and the airport returned to normal, the director personally thanked each officer. No blame, no harsh words, only acknowledgement of their courage. He said, "Fear makes people follow orders blindly. Courage makes them do what is right. You chose wisely today." The imposters were eventually arrested and investigated. Evidence showed they were part of a secret network trying to manipulate government authority for personal gain. Their plan to silence the director had failed. Thanks to the courage of ordinary officers who refused to act blindly, news of the incident reached national media. People were shocked to learn that the FBI director had been arrested at the airport. But even more inspiring was the story of the airport officers who chose to act with integrity. Their names were praised quietly, without fanfare. But their actions inspired many. The director returned to his work, now more vigilant but still calm. He continued his mission to fight corruption, knowing that truth could be defended when ordinary people decided to do extraordinary things. And the officers, once uncertain and afraid, carried with them a lesson they would never forget. Courage is contagious. And standing for what is right, Evan, in the face of danger, changes everything. The airport eventually went back to normal. Travelers moved quickly through gates. Announcements echoed. Luggage rolled over marble floors. And people rushed to catch their flights. But inside the walls of that holding room, something permanent had happened. Fear had been challenged. Justice had been protected. And a small group of ordinary people had become heroes, not because they sought recognition, but because they chose to do what was right when it mattered most. And in the quiet moments afterward, the director quietly said to himself, "Truth always finds those who are willing to protect it, no matter the danger." The story ended not with violence or chaos, but with courage, clarity, and justice.